Another week, boys, and another TWAB. This week at Bungie, happy TWAB's Day, Guardians. This week we are back with a bit of a hefty TWAB, including some weapons and the economy changes mentioned last week. So sit tight, because we're going to be passing the mic to a few different teams to chat with us all today. Oh, now trick or treat. We also wanted to call out a reminder for Festival of the Lost starting next week. Our social channels will have the trailer Tuesday morning, but before we share all of the candy and goodies, we wanted to share our newest costumes. Wait a second, this is Destiny we're talking about. Ornaments! That's right, fellas, this is our armor this year, looking like something straight out of Gundam Wing. I'm actually really looking forward to this armor set, no lie. Also, National Coming Out Day was October the 11th, which is a day of awareness, education, and solidarity for the LGBTQIA plus community. Feel free to check that out, guys. There's a link to it. We're gonna jump right into the thick of things though today, starting with Destination Materials update. All right, Guardians, it's time to discuss the changes around our Destination Materials, so let's hand the mic over to design lead Josh Kolinsky. So from Josh here, hey Guardians, Josh Kolinsky here to talk to you all about Destination Materials. You know, all of those dust-like shards, helium filaments, microphasic data lattices that you've had sitting in your inventory for years? We've taken a lot of time to evaluate their place within Destiny 2 and have decided that in Season 19, these items will say goodbye. But why have we made this change? And what does it mean for you all as you explore the various destinations in Destiny 2? Well, read on and you'll find out. Starting in Season 19, players will no longer be able to obtain the following items: dust-like shards, microphasic data lattice, helium filaments, buried bows, spin metal leaves, and glacial starwort. The keyword here is obtain. Unlike the previous currencies that we have removed from the game, these materials will not be fully deprecated, but I'm getting ahead of myself. More on that in a bit. A simpler economy. Oh, if only, right? First and foremost, we have to talk about why we decided to make this change. After all, these materials have been part of the DNA of Destiny since the very beginning, and they literally have, guys, since the very beginning. The simplest answer is that Destiny has grown to become a much more complex game than it started out all those years ago. One of the major goals that we have on the economy team for Destiny 2 is making the game more approachable to new and returning players. One way that we can do that is by reducing the number of currencies that players need to understand and keep track of. This helps us reduce the cognitive load that Destiny's economy places on the player. With fewer currencies to manage, it'll be easier for players to learn and remember the value of the items that they have in their inventories. Removing these materials also benefits players by freeing up inventory space and making it easier to find the items that they are looking for. Times they are exchanging. The first thing many of you are probably asking as you read this is, what about material exchange? And I'll let you know it's not going away. Master Raoul will continue to provide the services that Spider once did, although there will be some changes. As mentioned a bit earlier, these materials will not be fully deprecated as we have done with Destination Materials in the past. Instead, Raoul will continue to accept any Destination Materials that you have, although we'll see them exchanged at a lower rate than they had previously. Raoul will also no longer sell Destination Materials to players. Starting in Season 19, Raoul will now exchange 5,000 Glimmer for a stack of 20 Destination Materials. If players have less than 20 of a material in their inventory, Raoul will exchange 250 Glimmer for each individual material offered by the player. Once Season 19 begins, this will be the only use for Destination Materials moving forward, so you can safely exchange all of your materials and free up that inventory space. However, there's some new items that Master Raoul has found and interest in. Starting in Season 19, players can exchange excess dark fragments, phantasmal fragments, and here are always pieces at Raoul in exchange for Glimmer. Finally, the cost of exchanging legendary shards for Glimmer remains unchanged. Enhancement Prism and Ascendant Shard costs will see Destination Material costs removed and replaced with legendary shard costs. Okay, so you can actually see it right here, guys. Enhancement Prism, Ascendant Shard, amount received, material costs, yada yada. Essentially, Destination Materials has been removed. Now, if you're wondering, Cross, why are they doing this? Bungie has actually been doing this exact same thing for the past couple years, slowly but surely, from mods to certain elemental affinities to Destination Materials, other currencies. Bungie is trying to simplify the game, which is where weapon crafting really was weird, because they brought in all these different materials and we were like, yo, Bungie, what the hell? This is completely different from what you guys have been trying to do for years now. But they have since deprecated a lot of those currencies. So this is just Bungie's way of making the game easier to understand, which I'm okay for. Less management on our end. Now, public service. Now that you know about the changes to the material exchange, you're probably thinking, well, there goes the easiest way to get Glimmer, and that's not lost on us. To offset this, we want to take an opportunity to breathe new life into part of the Destiny 2 gameplay loop that maybe doesn't get as much attention as it used to: public events. In Season 19, public events will be getting a big Glimmer boost, especially the heroic versions. So the next time you see Fallen mining for Glimmer on the EDZ, take a moment to hop off your Sparrow and help your fellow Guardians take home some of that sweet shimmering Glimmer for yourselves. When completing heroic public events, players can now expect to earn 10,000 to 12.5 thousand Glimmer per completion? Oh my god. Okay. When completing normal public events, players can expect to earn between 3,300 and 4,645 Glimmer. So definitely want to do the heroic heroics, but that's pretty good, man. Dude, just jump in on the tail end of heroic public events. Bungie is obviously doing this because they want us to jump in there and help some of these new light players and other new players with these events. Look at that. Making MMO moves, Bungie. Now, Bungie does note here, these are raw numbers without glimmer boosting mods on bonuses enabled. Gotcha. So those numbers are going to be even higher with those buffs. Now, the price of change. As mentioned earlier, the only use for destination materials will be at Raul's material exchange. That means that anything that previously cost the player destination materials, such as purchasing exotic weapons at the Monument to Lost Light, will see some updates. In the case of these legacy exotic weapons, the destination materials cost will be replaced with a legendary shard cost. Raid exotics, such as Anarchy and Teraba, will see no change to the current costs. Other items that once saw destination materials as part of the purchase costs, such as upgrade modules, enhancement prisms, and ascendant shards, will simply see the destination material cost removed entirely, with no future changes to their current price points. Now, Mod Squad. In a world without destination materials, there are a few ghost mods that need to be addressed. First, the 3 materialism mods, Crucible, Gambit, and Vanguard, will be removed at the start of Season 19. Additionally, the Bountiful Harvest mod's functionality has changed. Equipping this mod to your ghost will now increase Glimmer when harvesting from resource nodes. Okay. I'm living in a material world and I'm a material guardian. You dang right. The primary source of destination materials has always been resource nodes scattered across the various destinations in Destiny. Those resource nodes are not going anywhere, and it's still in every player's best interest to collect from any of the nodes you see along your journeys. As many players noticed, with the release of the Witch Queen, the deposits of fundamental osmium found around Savathun's throne world did not grant a currency, but instead delivered Glimmer, XP, and reputation directly to the player. Though we will not be creating new reputation systems for our previous destination vendors, such as Devrim, Velsafe, Petra, and others at this time, we will be working to improve these experience. In fact, Devrim, K, and Velsafe, our longest tenured destination vendors who have been with us since the Red War, will be getting a small update in Season 19. The reputation systems that saw players turning in destination materials to gain reputation ranks have been removed. This also means there are no longer rank requirements to purchase armor from these vendors. Additionally, the ghost shells and emblems that were once earned via reputation rank increases can now be purchased directly from Devrim or Felsafe for 10 legendary shards each. We have also increased the number of daily bounties that Devrim and Felsafe offer from 3 to 4, though we don't have repeatable bounties to add to these destinations at this time. It brings us closer to parity across all of the destination vendors. Finally, we will be removing the sale of sunset weapons from both vendors when the season goes live. This is largely to prevent players from wasting resources on weapons that cannot be upgraded to the current level cap. By the way, this is in regards to Devrim and Felsafe, so don't be getting freaked out here. I'm sure there's a couple weapons in there you may want, but they're sunset, so yeah, unless you're just a collector. Destiny Brazil has entered the chat. As I mentioned at the beginning of the TWAB, we are passing the mic like a hot potato to a bunch of teams today. This section is another one of those, so let's gather around and see what our LATAM community manager Bruno has to say. Fellas, I can't help myself, but we don't talk about Bruno. Bruno! This TWAB could also be this week at Brazil, since we launched our social media channels for Brazil on Tuesday. Oba. If you want to get updates in Portuguese, just go and drop us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And I hope I said that right. Oba, Aba, Oba. Brazil is a wonderful country with passionate players, talented artists, and outstanding creators, like Everson Maido, who we featured in a community focus not so long ago. With the launch of the new international social media channels, the reach of our communications will now go a bit further and give us the capacity to better support international players. Understanding the needs of different parts of the world and gathering feedback in a more direct way will for sure help us deliver a better Destiny experience. So let's not mince words here and celebrate. This is a big step for us and we couldn't be happier. See you Starside Guardios. Welcome Brazil! Now mid-season weapons tuning. Oh boy, let's get it baby. Last week we had a nice chat with the weapons team covering a wide array of questions. They also touched on some plans for weapon tuning coming in the mid-season patch next week. Associate designer Mercules is back again to give more detail on the what and the why for the weapon changes coming in 6.2.5. So from Mercules here, hello everyone. We have a lot to talk about in this mid-season patch from a weapon standpoint, so let's dive right in. One note before we get started, when we say ease of use, we usually mean one or a combination of the following things: stability, aim assist, recoil direction, body shot time to kill value, or optimal time to kill crit percentage. That is, requiring a weapon that requires 100% critical shots to achieve an optimal TTK is lower ease of use, and a weapon requiring 50% critical shot to get optimal is higher ease of use. We have seen this question asked a lot and wanted to address it up front so that in the future you can have a better idea of where we are looking when we say we want to address the ease of use of certain weapons for balance purposes. Starting with weapon archetypes. Auto rifles. Auto rifles see strong usage in most PvP activities, around 25%, but that drops to around 13% in in-game PvP, for example, Trials of Osiris. We often hear suggestions that we should decrease the time to kill value or increase the range of auto rifles, but we've investigated those options and found that with with very minor changes to either, they can quickly become oppressive across PvP sandboxes. Yes, they can. Look no further than the 600 round per minute auto rifle meta. As it stands, several high impact 360 round per minutes and precision frames for 50 round per minute auto rifles are already capable of outranging hand cannons, and at least one adaptive frame can as well. And we do not want them wholeheartedly competing with pulse rifles in that 40 meter plus range. In addition, even a single bullet reduction in TTK places many auto rifle subfamilies into the best in class lethality. As such, we have decided to lean more heavily into increasing their ease of use and making them feel better to shoot within their optimal ranges, with a substantial buffs to stability. Although the changes is only to the high end of the stat curve, the change affects all stat values above 0, with increasing effects as you get to higher stat values. So for precision frame auto rifles, these weapons have languished since the Uriel's Gift meta of early Destiny 2. And because they are inherently so stable, they did not benefit much from the changes outlined above. As such, we have slightly brought their critical hit multiplier up to increase their critical hit damage, which, combined with the body shot damage buff from last season, puts them in a much stronger position without directly lowering optimal time to kill. So general, increase the effects of the stability stat on recoil reduction by 20% at the high end. Precision frames, increase the crit damage multiplier from 1.5 to 1.55. Crit damage now goes from 30 to 31. Okay, so just some rough numbers here, guys, on precisions. Auto rifles and that archetype have a time to kill value of 0.8 seconds, dealing 30 damage per crit, and 6 crits, 1 body. What this is actually going to allow you to do now is you're still going to get a TTK value of 0.8 seconds, but you're going to be able to do it in 5 crits, 2 body on Guardians, 7 resilience or less, which is very impressive. Again, little bits of forgiveness on top of the increase in stability. Now, bows. As mentioned in a previous TWAB, we want to reduce the effectiveness of max speed bow swapping as a strategy, as it is functionally fast enough that it is nearly impossible to counter in high-level gameplay. The below change is not massive, but should move the total time for bow swap kill to be closer to other primary weapons and their optimal time to kill, giving players a better opportunity to fight back against it. So increased bow stow duration varies by subfamily and handling stat. Before 0 to 100 handling stat, lightweight frames 0.4 seconds to 0.2, precision frames 0.43 to 0.2. After 0 to 100 handling stat, this is now 0.45 to 0.3, and then 0.48 to 0.33. Interesting, that's not much. I mean, these are small values, but you see Bungie's trying to actually take into account like what an optimal time to kill value is for most of our primary weapons and match it here to what the swap speed would be after the release of an era, right? And this would allow the opposing player more opportunity to counter the bow on that swap or before that swap is completed. Now, pulse rifles. Pulse rifles are strong in the current sandbox, both due to the reduced dominance of other mid to long range weapons and the availability of multiple easily acquirable, craftable, strong options. In addition, a few balance passes back, we buffed their range a moderate amount, but in the current sandbox, we no longer feel they need that help across the board. As such, we have removed the range bonus at the lower end while retaining it at the high end to continue rewarding those who spec into range without giving the same advantage to those who do not. We also felt that there was not enough of a difference in the feel of weapon handling across pulse rifle subfamilies, so we have rebalanced the stat to decrease the effects slightly at the low end and raise them at the high end. Okay, so obviously they're wanting you to spec more into those stats versus having them being universally good at mid-tier ranges, right? Now, adaptive frames, 390 round per minute pulse rifles have not been favored since the bygone era, and we believe this change will be enough to increase their strength relative to other pulse rifles without pushing them too far into meta territory. Yeah, adaptives have just naturally better stats. We'll see though. Now, as for rapid fire frames, 540s. Peace of Mind has an out-of-band zoom stat that allows it to compete at longer ranges than would be expected for the subfamily. So it'll be the first of multiple zoom outliers we will be looking at bringing in line over the next season. General, rebalance the effect of the handling stat across pulse rifles. The handling stat affects a weapon's ready, stow, and aim down sight speed. Increase the effects of handling by 5% at the high end. Mostly affects lightweights and adaptive frame pulse rifles. Reduce effects of handling by 2% at the low end. Mostly affects high impacts and rapid fire frame pulse rifles. Adjusted damage fall off scale based on the range stats. 0 range reduced from 16 meters to 15 meters. 100 range unchanged. Yeah, and you can scale that from 0 to 100. Adaptive frame pulse rifles increase the precision multiplier from 1.6 to 1.65. Crit damage goes from 30.4 to 31.4. This also allows a weapon to kill guardians below tier 4 resilience with 6 crits. Oh, in 0.6 seconds? Good God, fellas, we just got through reviewing yesteryear, and I told y'all that it could be nasty if Bungie made a slight tweak to adaptives. And here we are. Here we freaking are. You know what else is going to be good? And a lot of people don't realize how good it actually is in PvP because it's looked at as a PvE pulse rifle. Collective obligation. Trust me, it's gonna be putting in work. Rapid fire frame pulse rifles. Peace of mind base zoom has been reduced from 19 to 18. Get slapped, peace of mind. Personally, I already thought that peace of mind and Horus Lease Adept were like tied. Now I think Horus Lease is the best with this change. We'll see though. Moving on to scout rifles. When we buffed high impact 150 round per minute scout rifles last season, the main goal was to get them up off the floor by reducing how punishing hitting body shots was. We overbuffed them a bit, going so far as to make the optimal TTK more forgiving against low resilience as well. This has made them slightly too easy to use for a weapon with functionally unlimited range. The below change to damage will take their optimal TTK back to requiring 3 crits across all resilience values, while retaining the body shot TTK from the previous balance pass. So high impact scout rifles reduce body damage from 42 to now 40, and crit damage from 73.5 to 70. Oh, are we really getting a scout rifle nerf? I can't believe it, man. Like, I get why they're doing it. They're essentially nerfing high impact pulse rifles with all these changes. When all of this goes through, you'll see. And they're worried that all of a sudden we're going to be in a 150 round per minute scout rifle meta, so Bungie is preemptively slapping those two. Now, sidearms. Interestingly, sidearms have long had substantial less auto aim range compared to damage range, a decision made many moons ago. With the removal of the auto aim fall off bonus from rangefinder, we felt that sidearms in general seemed lacking in the 15-meter engagement distance, particularly on mouse and keyboard. As such, the change should bring them up to near parity with other weapons' auto aim to damage fall off ratios. For comparison's sake, sidearms with rangefinder should feel about the same after this change as they do in the game now, but sidearms without rangefinder should feel notably better. So general here, increase auto aim fall off distance by 30% across the board. All right, so it would actually lose auto aim before actually receiving damage fall off, and Bungie is now buffing that. And you know what else is getting a buff in the future? Traveler's Chosen is getting surplus. Do you know how disgusting that sidearm is about to be? Dear baby Jesus, we're about to be in a sidearm meta. Submachine guns. We wanted to be very careful touching submachine guns, as we believe that most of them are in a good place within their intended ranges. However, in-game and in playtests, it has become apparent that some SMGs can be used well outside of this distance effectively, and has made it difficult for other weapons to compete. We've addressed a couple outliers individually, but have also made a change to rein in how strong SMGs are once damage fall off begins. As mentioned above, some outliers in the precision frame 600 round per minute subfamily of SMGs have out of band zoom values, to the point that they can't overstep the effective ranges of some auto rifles. These outliers have made it difficult to justify tuning precision frames overall. At the same time, their 0.8 second optimal TTK makes them weak options against other SMGs, forcing them to rely on their high effective range and damage boosting perks in order to compete. So lightweight frame SMGs currently overlap too much with adaptive frames, so we're making a very small change that will help differentiate them. Oh, all right, let's see how bad this is. General, reduce damage fall off in the distance at which the damage dealt by the weapon in hip fire reaches its lowest point. Aiming down sights extends this distance by a factor of the zoom from 24 meters to 23 meters across the board. Precision frame SMGs increase base damage from 16 to 17. Crit damage goes from 22.4 to 23.8. Reduce the zoom of Shire's Wrath Adept, and friction fire from 16 to 15. Dude, I don't care. That's a good damage buff, man. Shire is still gonna be disgusting. It already has such good stat values, and it's getting a damage buff. Lightweight frame SMGs reduce base damage from 11 to 10.85, and crit damage from 18.2 to 17.9. Interesting. Such small values, right? Now, I just ran the numbers on them. You may be thinking, that doesn't seem like a substantial buff. Turns out, it actually makes a difference. A very subtle difference, but still, nonetheless, a difference. With that change, lightweights and their 0.67 time to kill value, which requires 10 crits in one body, won't even be able to achieve that on Guardians 4 resilience or higher. So what that means is, instead of 10 crits, you're gonna need 11 crits. Little subtle changes. I know we're talking like fractions here, but they make a big difference on rapid fire weapons like this. Now, fusion rifles. Precision frame fusion rifles have seen an uptick in usage since we buffed them to allow them to kill in 5 bolts, and they're sucking the air out of the room for the other subfamilies due to their extremely high ease of use. The below change should make it slightly harder for players to maintain perfect vertical recoil without additional manual control of the bolt spread. So precision frame fusion rifles reduce the effect of the intrinsic precision frame perk and what it has on recoil direction by 50%. By the way, it's noted here only for fusion rifles. So this won't affect other archetypes that are categorized as precision frames. And by the way, guys, recoil direction makes a big difference on fusions, hence why main ingredient is so easy to use. Now, glaives. Glaives have been difficult to counter when they have shield energy, but this change should address that. We will continue to keep an eye on glaive shield damage resistance in the future, especially when their improved hit registration changes come into effect in Season 19. For now, though, reduce glaive shield damage resistance versus players from 75% to 50%. Damage from player supers unchanged at 50%. Damage from non-players unchanged at at 97.5%. All right, so hopefully this makes a difference. I will say, man, we went up against a team in trials of 3 glaive users, and you'd think we would have beat the hell out of them. Turns out, no. Dude, they put it on us, and there was nothing we could do. Once they got those shields up, it was GG, man. Actually, that sounds pretty good. I think I'm gonna have a glaive run this weekend, just before it gets nerfed, you know what I mean? Sniper rifles. We made several changes trying to make challenging a sniper rifle more feasible over the years, but ultimately, the way flinch works makes this tricky to do in a way that didn't make them feel worse to use, particularly in PvE. Under the hood, incoming damage causes a player's aim to deflect by an angle dependent on weapon type and damage amount. And then there's a spring force that pulls aim back down. For spring nerds out there, this is defined as a damping ratio and spring force, often called a settle time. We made a change in Season 19 that has significantly moved the needle in the internal playtests. We've reduced the amount of flinch received in PvE to avoid adversely affecting that experience, but increased this settle time substantially. This means you'll continue to flinch away from your target without settling enough to shoot through flinch. Our goal is to discourage continuing to attempt to snipe when you're already under fire. The experience of sniping while not under fire won't change. So general, increase the settle time after receiving flinch by 60%. Reduce received flinch in PvE. Now that this has sufficient playtest time, we're making similar changes to linear fusion rifles in Season 19. All right. Arbalist Lawrence, you've had your time to shine. Now trace rifles. Like auto rifles, trace rifles have not been popular at high levels of play outside of some particularly niche builds. When we investigated ways to improve their performance, we found that a small increase in damage had a dramatic and negative effect in terms of how it felt to play against them. Imagine consistently being killed by an out of bounds with Rampage at 30 meters to 35 meters. And the range is quite respectable on its own. Indeed, what we found was that the lack of stability made it difficult for most trace rifles to be used at further points of their intended engagement ranges because it was difficult to sustain precision fire on moving targets. So we have increased their stability by an even larger amount than we did with auto rifles. At high stability stats, this should make trace rifles feel much more like laser beams and less like recoiling Ghostbuster proton packs. So general, increase the effect the stability stat has on recoil reduction at the low end by 10% and at the high end by 25%. Yeah, guys, we actually just took Divinity inside of trials this past weekend. It was quite the experience. Meta! Now rocket launchers. Although rocket launchers see passable usage in PvP, they lag far behind other heavy weapons, like linear fusion rifles and heavy grenade launchers in effectiveness, due in large part to their inability to get multiple kills per magazine without targets being grouped closely together. With an increase of blast radius, this should make it noticeably easier to net kills on targets that are not right next to the center of the blast. So general, increase blast radius by 0.4 meters across the board. Oh my god, 0.4 meters. I can't even fathom how meta that's gonna be. Now perks. Gut shot straight. We have multiple reports that the audio was triggering frequently enough to be annoying. So we have removed the audio cue from activation. General, remove audio from activation. Well, if you thought it was gonna get a tweak or a buff or even a nerf, nope, just the audio. Rangefinder. Rangefinder has long been one of the flat out strongest perks in the game across multiple archetypes of weapons due to how effective zoom is at improving multiple aspects of weapon performance, combined with the fact that it has a neutral activator. It does not require getting a kill or dealing damage to activate. The bonus of increasing auto aim fall off distance by 20% puts this perk into a league of its own in terms of power, as it massively increases the ease of use of certain weapon types well beyond even the increased engagement range provided by the zoom, and makes it difficult for any other perks to compete without substantial power creep. As such, we have made the decision to retain the zoom bonus but remove the auto aim fall off bonus. We expect the perk to remain a top choice, but it will be less dominant compared to other options. General, remove the additional 20% bonus on aim assist fall off. So it's just gonna stop, guys. It's gonna stop at what the weapon's original intended range was before rangefinder was included, right? Therefore not extending the stickiness of the weapon itself. Now, exotics. Jade Rabbit. Jade Rabbit has a unique stat package compared to almost all of the high impact scout rifles in the game and has massively high aim assist and stability. The aim assist puts this weapon's ease of use well above what we find to be acceptable for a weapon with nearly unlimited range and fast optimal TTK, now that high impact scout rifles are performing comparatively better than they have been in the past. The time has come to bring Jade Rabbit more in line with the upper end of other scout rifles in its subfamily. So general, reduce aim assist by 20. Again, guys, this is on top of the scout rifle nerf that's coming to 150s. On top of the change coming to Jade Rabbit next season, in which they're essentially massacring its perk. I know they kind of said it's a buff, but let's be real, it's a fix / nerf. Now, Lord of Wolves. When we nerfed Lord of Wolves for PvP, we mentioned that it was the first part of a larger rework that we were planning for the weapon aimed at making it more competitive in PvE content. Right now, the Release the Wolves perk reduces accuracy by a substantial amount, with the intention that it would be useless against small targets, but still land shots on large larger targets. The increased spread meant that it was difficult to land critical hits, even on large targets without having to be dangerously close to them. In content where the extra damage matters, this can often be a lethal experience. So we reduced the accuracy penalty by 70%. It should still be inaccurate enough that using Release the Wolves in PvP against Guardians would not be effective, but it will make it much easier to constantly hit critical hits on big targets in PvE without needing to be right next to them. So with Release the Wolves active, reduce aim down sight accuracy penalty 10 times to not 3 times. Remove the 25% universal base damage buff, added 40% additional PvE damage, remove the 50% critical hit multiplier penalty, and added full auto as an intrinsic perk. My lord. Lord of Wolves, you is about to be meta. Now notice they got rid of the 25% universal base damage buff. This is obviously targeting PvP, but that is countered by the 40% additional PvE damage buff. So just keep that in mind, guys. Cancels it out. Now, no time to explain. This gun has been dominant in PvP for much of the last season, topping the trials usage and kill charts week in and week out. However, we had to be careful in tuning this weapon because its dominance is not universal. This weapon sees over twice its usage and dramatically higher effectiveness on mouse and keyboard than it does on controller. For example, on mouse and keyboard, no time to explain makes up 29.9% of all pulse rifle usage in PvP and accounts for 31.1% of pulse rifle kills. On controller, no time to explain is 12.3% of pulse rifle usage and only 12.5% of pulse rifle kills. That's crazy. That is a huge difference. With mouse and keyboard having higher stability, accuracy, and auto aim, 2 bursts from no time to explain are much easier to achieve in that sandbox. So we needed to tune in a way that the difference was noticeable on mouse and keyboard, but did not ruin gun feel for controller players. At the same time, we also wanted skilled players to continue to be able to use the weapon effectively, while lowering the overall ease of use to make it more difficult to perform well within the weapon. We tested several changes and decided on a significant reduction to the recoil direction stat, which spreads out the burst pattern a noticeable but not uncontrollable amount. Paired with the reduction in aim assist, we believe that the weapon will remain viable in high-level gameplay, but will be less dominant compared to other weapons operating within the same range, especially given the changes to the whole pulse rifle archetype. That is true, guys. Again, this is on top of the blanket changes coming to pulse rifles, and this is a high impact, so it will be greatly affected by those blanket changes. We reduced recoil direction stat from 90 to now 73, reduced aim assist stat from 45 to 40. Interesting. An interesting value, right? Now, Wrist Runner. Wrist Runner is a very niche weapon with a very niche strength, but 50% damage resistance in PvP with the perk active is far out of band from where we would like neutrally triggered damage resistance options to exist. We have reduced it down to 15%, which is still among the highest damage resistance options available, while at the same time making it less of a free win option versus other players who are using arc weapons. So we reduced damage resistance versus players when arc superconductor is active from 50% to 15%. Now, future items. In addition to the items mentioned in last week's TWAB, we wanted to make note of a few more things we are looking at in the next season, not necessarily at launch though. Special ammo linear fusion rifles, Lawrence driver and arbalists, auto aim reduction, flinch tuning, machine gun balancing, make them a better heavy option in PvP, reduce the difference between them and other heavy weapons in PvE, make them less punishing to use for ad clearing, remove damage penalty to Dead Man's Tail at 5 stacks of cranial spike. Oh, DMT, come back! Please be good again! Outside of that, guys, known issues are pretty much still the same. Gurfalcon is still disabled. Goncore's exotic warlock helmet doesn't appear in collections, amongst other things. Now, as a final note here from Bungie, there we have it, Guardians. This week's TWAB. We know it was a lot of info to share all at once, so please feel free to sound off on socials with any questions you may have. We're always learning and adjusting our communication methods, so we appreciate your time when responding to us with that kind of information. Okay, it's time to get back out there. Thank you for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you next week with our favorite mask on for Festival of the Lost. Stay crafty, Sam. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's TWAB. It's quite a thick one. We will be gathering gameplay of everything now going into these sandbox changes next week. I do want to do a side-by-side comparison of everything. We're also going to talk about some weapons that I think are going to be noticeably better starting next week. But again, this is a sandbox change that's going to lead into the big sandbox change coming in about a month and a half when we get into the new season. And that's right. I think the new season is what, November 20-something? Into November, somewhere around Thanksgiving. Regardless though, guys, big changes on the horizon, as well as our Halloween event. We'll have guides on that as well. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.